Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Living on the Verge podcast. Today we're covering The Valley. So here's what we're going to do. We already covered episode number 1. So we're going to start at the after show for episode number 1, and we're going to go through the after show for episode number 3. We'll do a separate podcast to get you caught up on episode 4, which was just a little bit earlier this week. And then we'll be all caught up on The Valley, and we can take it from there. But guess what, you guys? I have some stuff to report I'm really excited to tell you about. I was a guest on the live podcast that David Yontef and Sarah Fraser had. It is the Sarah Fraser Show and Behind the Velvet Rope. Those are two very popular, very successful, long-time running podcasts. And I have managed to forge a relationship, if you will, with David. And then after having been on the live podcast, I think I now have somewhat of a friendship with Sarah as well. So they were very welcoming, very lovely. They promoted my podcast. They asked questions. At one point, David said, sometimes Virginia has more tea than I do. In fact, he told me that I believe this week he has some tea that I gave him last week when we were talking about this live podcast. And he said, I couldn't remember where I heard it, but I did say it on the podcast. And now that you mention it, I realized that it was you who gave me the scoop. So there you go, guys. I had a really good time. I'm looking forward to hanging out with David and Sarah in the near future. We're supposed to have dinner in a few weeks, and we're talking about possibly collaborating. I know David said he'd already come on the podcast. I think I could get Sarah to come on as well. So stay tuned, guys. Because I've been busy gallivanting around town and watching filmings of Real Housewives shows, I have fallen behind on keeping you up to speed. So let's do the Valley After Show episode 1. And we'll start off by talking about the iPad incident. Jack says the timeline was different, and Britt says it was way before. So she admits there was a moment when they were going to try and work on things, but then Jack fucks it all up by gaslighting. I mean, we already know that we can expect that from Jax anytime we're going to hear it. He takes 2 steps forward and 4 steps back. And having met Jax, I really got a different impression of him because I felt as though he had kind of had an awakening of sorts. But then I watched the after show, and I know it wasn't filmed that long ago. So I don't know how all of that could have changed. And I tend to believe Brittany when she says that it was just, it was more than just the drug abuse and the alcohol abuse. Jax has a lot of personality adjustments to make, if you will. And I don't disagree. Some of the things he said on this after show kind of pissed me off, but let's move on. So Jason and Luke believe Brittany. They say that, they understand that everything was agreed upon, and Jax admits that they could see other people, but it was the fact that it was a friend of his that hurt him so much. And so then they show Kristen talking about how Jax is a pathological liar. And, Jax says Britt deserves to be loved and happy and that it's not him, and he gets that. And that is a growth for Jax. So we're going to give him that. Brittany admits that Julian was friends, but more than a group friend. And Lala says he was friends with whomever was picking up the tab and paying for his Uber. Sheesh. The other boys think that Jax is blowing things out of proportion, and the consensus is that they were close, but that Julian was kind of a user. The boys think that Brittany did it to retaliate, but Tom doesn't think it was done consciously. Zach's comments about Janet's baby. Zach claims he was drunk, blackout drunk, and Brittany was also drunk. And Zach said he wasn't in a good headspace at the time. He says that he's apologized to everyone, even those on the periphery. And I don't know if any of this is true, but he seems pretty adamant about the fact that he thought that they had moved on. He says everybody stepped back from him and kind of just abandoned him. And, Sheena says that she hopes Kristen and Janet will make up. So we move on, and we know that Lala has her own personality and way of delivering things, and she does not disappoint on this after show. I'm not quite sure that I like her on the after show. I listen to her podcast and she very admittedly says that it's not her show, that she just, hangs out and shows up. And for that reason, she's not even covering it on her podcast, et cetera, et cetera. But it just feels like she's a plant to like cause drama. If you watch the after show, listen to some of the things she says and how she says them. I feel like she's just trying to stir up shit. And Lala, I love you, but you don't always have to be controversial. You could just kind of show up and, do the show and then go home. Well, Lala says she knows Julian, the love bomber. And 2 weeks after the her breakup with her baby daddy, with Ocean's daddy, that he was, intimating that there could be a family dynamic and that their kids could be raised together. She said he's just, a hanger-oner. And she's triggered when everyone knows something that she doesn't, which is why she got so upset with Brittany when she had to find out through somebody else that Brittany had hooked up with Julian. But once Brittany told Lala that Julian made her feel beautiful, Lala decided to let bygones be bygones. And, it was just the fact that she didn't know that had hurt her more than anything else. Well, Brittany says there's a lot I didn't know about Julian. For example, that he was still living with his baby's mama as he was hooking up with me and other people. Lala gives her the side eye and says, if you would have told me, I could have saved you a lot of time. Touche, Lala. Well, then Jax says that they took Cruz to the aquarium and to Hooters for lunch. To Hooters for lunch? I know that the Vanderpump world loves Hooters. I get that a lot of them have worked there, et cetera, et cetera. I have just never thought of taking my family to Hooters for lunch, much less my 3-year-old, I believe, at the time. I'm not judging. I just don't know what a kid there would eat. And what is there for a family to do at Hooters? Okay, well, maybe I am judging a little bit, but let's move on. Jack said that Brittany wanted to hook up again to see if, quote, they still had it, end quote. And Jack said, no way. And then Brittany says that a year later, Jax is still bugging her. Kristen and Jesse. What, you guys? Kristen and Jesse? What an unlikely pairing, right? Well, they become friends. Jesse said that Kristen sent him a long, really meaningful text, basically saying that she didn't know what he was going through. So consequently, they became friends. Apparently, they spent all summer together. At least that's what Jesse told me when I met him at Jax's. And he said, yeah, you're not going to believe it, but Luke and Kristen are probably my closest friends right now. So they asked Luke what he thought, and he said, I really think that Michelle was lying about all of the things. And I really think that the reason that we ended up being closer to Jesse is because he just tried harder. And Michelle says she doesn't think things will ever be the same. And Sheena says, never say never. Becoming a mom brings women together. So the producer asks Tom and Jax, about Schwartz and Sandy's and, how Tom feels about the bar closing. And he had some pretty interesting and insightful things to say. First of all, having spoken to Tom a few times recently and just watching him on the show and also watching his vibe on Instagram, I feel like he's kind of come to terms with who he is, and he seems very much more at peace and very level-headed. So that makes me happy. But here's what he said. He said that he is sad, but he has peace, and now he knows he did his best. He said the bar made him grow in gravitas and grit. And he says his balls dropped. On Sandoval, he says, yes, they are still friends, but the friendship is strained. Well, listen, when they were at Jax's and Tom showed up late in the evening, I did not see Sandoval and Schwartz give the, regular hug like Sandoval gave to Jax. So maybe there is still a little bit of a strain, and hopefully those two will work things out because, Listen, I mean, both of them defied their partners back in the day for the love that they had for one another. So to see that that has, gone south kind of makes me sad as a Vanderpump fan. Then Jax chimes in and says that he really admires Tom's ability to forgive. And that is true. Tom is a very forgiving person, sometimes to a fault. But you're right, Jax, you could use a little bit of that. And, that was pretty much it for the after show episode 1. I'm really loving these after shows. I think that they bring a different spin to things, and we get to hear a different perspective at a different time, which makes it kind of interesting. So let's move on to episode 2 of The Valley. Well, it opens with Danny and Nia talking more about baby number 4. And then Danny kind of barters for a house. He says, if we're able to get a house in Santa Clarita, then we can have baby number 4. Then Jax and Kristen. That was kind of a sad conversation. When Kristen is the voice of reason, and no offense to Kristen, I just kind of love this season Kristen. And honestly, the Kristen of late, like she seems to have really evolved, and I am really liking this new Kristen. But when Kristen is the person talking sense into Jax, there's something wrong in the, Vander universe, the Valleyverse, I guess we're calling it now. Anyhow, Kristen basically points out to Jax, like, how much more rock bottom can you get? You can't even see your child alone. And he kind of hems and haws, and he understands where he's at, but I don't think he's really realized it yet. Most of us know someone who has gone through this, or who, know someone who has gone through this. But for the most part, we all know someone relatively firsthand that has been through some sort of a struggle. And you can tell when they know they've hit their rock bottom. I don't know Jax personally. I've met him, but I don't know him personally. But from an outside point of view, it doesn't look like he gets it yet to me, guys. So Zach shows up to Brittany, and he brings Chinese food, and they go hang out by the pool. Meanwhile, little Cruz is out there swimming, and Brittany starts talking about sending booby pictures and about what's going on with Jax. And honestly, I hate this. I hate that they have to film in front of Cruz and talk about these things. I think I've said that before. I know, spoiler alert, that Brittany does address this a little later and says she hates doing this in front of Cruz as well. But it's just kind of hard to watch because, I'm from the school of children do not need to be within earshot of everything that adults say. And even though kids hear more than we think they hear, a little bit of thought, a little bit of, listen, now's not the good time, could go a long way when it comes to some of these conversations. But what struck me even more than the whole Cruz thing was, have you ever noticed, like, when there's a crisis in a family and people just kind of start showing up with food, and that's what this looked like to me. You knew that there was a crisis looming, but at this point, we don't know what it is. But all of a sudden, everybody is kind of surrounding Brittany and lifting her up, and it points to a looming crisis. Then Zach discusses Benji, but if you ask Zach, it's Benji. And I looked, it's spelled Benji. And he tells us the story of how they met and how he fell head over heels in love. But he's heartbroken because he tells Brittany they had to break up because his visa was expired. And oh, by the way, he is still married and he lives in Canada. So there's all these things working against Zach and Benji. So I'm anxious to see how this storyline develops. Next, we're at Jesse's house and we see Michelle and Jesse discussing visitation. So they're sitting down, they have this calendar, they're talking about the new visitation, and it gets a little contentious, but apparently they were able to reach some sort of an agreement because if you listen to Michelle's podcast, and if you listen to Jesse, they both say that they've kind of reached a good agreement. And Jesse most recently said that they're super, super close to being done and being able to finalize the divorce. We keep hearing about a friend of Jesse's who is actually Lacey from Orange County, you guys. That is her name. And apparently Sheena was told at a birthday party by Lacey that Lacey is still hooking up with other guys and most recently had hooked up with the guy from Baywatch. And I don't know if Lacey was just trying to impress people or make a name for herself, because I don't think Sheena just made this up. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because Jesse and Lacey are still together to this day. He alluded to moving to Orange County. She's from Orange County. And there's a lot of drama surrounding Lacey and the fact that she threatened to serve Michelle with cease and desist because she didn't want to be mentioned on the show. Jesse says, I think Michelle is actively trying to hurt me. It's true. When a couple breaks up, there's always one part of the couple, sometimes both, but usually it's just one of the parties that is really, really vengeful and mean and resentful and conniving. And in this case, it's the party that left the marriage. Usually it's the person that is left, unless the person that left the marriage left under really tough circumstances. And in this case, Michelle talks about being verbally abused and never physically nurtured in any way. So it makes sense, but I just don't understand this couple. If they've agreed to not be married anymore, they do not need to continue to throw daggers at one another. It's juvenile and it kind of gets boring to watch. So then Jason and Danny showed up at Jax's house. And at this point, Jax looks like crap, you guys. He looks terrible. And Danny walks in and makes a joke about, too bad I have hand, foot, and mouth disease. Jax freaks out, given that he's, such a clean freak. And Danny immediately says, I'm just kidding. But Jax wasn't sure. And so that was a kind of funny exchange. Is this an intervention? Well, if you ask Jason, it is kind of an intervention. They went over with the intent of trying to get Jax to realize that he needed some help. And so Jax is sitting there talking about how he knows. Well, it seems to me like at this point, Brittany, along with all of the people in the friends group, and even Alex Baskin and, probably some of the producers had all kind of given Jax an ultimatum, because you can tell by the way he's talking that he's kind of being forced into doing this. And so he said he contacted a mental health facility and that he suffers from depression and anxiety. And then he's talking to his sister and he says, should I go? And Jax's sister says, yes, mental illness and mania run in a family, and it would be a good idea for you to get some help. So I think that people behind the scenes know how bad things are, but we don't at this point. So then the assessment guy calls and, Jax, instead of saying, yes, I'm having a problem with substance abuse, basically explains that he's having a problem with anger and depression. And then for some weird reason, the guy pivots and says, okay, well, we got to handle the financial aspect of this first. And so it's going to be $30,000 for 30 days. Okay, first of all, I think, oh my gosh, if you are in crisis and you call for help, the first thing that the person says is how much it's going to cost. I don't know. Something about this weirdly seems off to me. I, again, know people who have gone into facilities and the very last thing they talk about is the finances, because the idea is when you get somebody to call in for help, to get them to actually take that help. And when you start talking money right away, then that gives them an excuse to get off the phone and go on with their addictive ways. I don't know, but this whole thing is weird to me. Maybe it was how it was edited, but either way, I hate it. So let's move on. Brittany meets Janice and Michelle at a restaurant called On the 30, and they start talking about all of the things going on. at one point, Michelle gets a little bit emotional and all the girls kind of feel bad for her. I think Michelle really preys on people's emotions and kind of is a little bit manipulative to get people to feel sorry for her. I think that makes her less likable. And I think that she does it because she knows she's not a very likable person. And that if she didn't do that, people would probably like her more anyway. So that's my 2 cents on that situation. And this is me trying to like Michelle, guys, just so you know. Now, Brittany tells us a story about how she went over to the house to get more stuff, and she walked into her bathroom and saw that there was a thong on the bathroom sink with a baby wipe on top of it. Ew. By now, most of you guys have heard about the thong and the baby wipe story if you are watching the show, but ew. Now, the chances that a girl is going to leave without her underwear are slim to none. It was morning. Brittany saw her on the ring, and, unless she was plastered and blacked out and left at 2 or 3 in the morning, then that's a little bit more understandable. But the idea that you're going to wipe yourself and then just leave both the wipe and the underwear on the counter, none of that makes sense. If you're a girl, you guys agree with me. If you're a guy, then you know that probably Jax planted this to piss Brittany off. That's my thought. That's my understanding. We'll get into it a little bit more when we talk about the after show, because Jax addresses this whole thong and baby wipe situation. But for now, I just think it's gross and ludicrous and really kind of evil, because it looks like definitely it was planted. So episode 2 ends, and now we're going to roll right on into the after show for episode 2. We have Jesse, Jax, and Tom seated together. So Jax is going to address the thong and the baby wipe on the sink. He says the underwear was thrown at him at the bar crawl. Remember at the summer last year, him and Tom, Jax and Tom were having these bar crawls where they'd get in a bus and they were giving you swag. I almost bought a ticket. I'm kind of glad I didn't, because to hear Jax think thongs were being thrown around in the air. The funny part about that is that Tom kind of looks funny. And, Jax maintains there was no girl belonging to the panty. Okay, Tom says, Jax, I was there at the bar crawl and there were not girls throwing around underwear. And now Jesse points out, because Jax quickly says, well, no. Somebody handed me the underwear and I just put it in my fanny pack. And Jesse says, oh, so the story keeps changing and now you're handed the underwear. Well, instead of Jax just moving on, he keeps up with the lie and he keeps giving more and more details, making it sound more and more far-fetched. But listen, that's what Jax does. And even the boys there with him are kind of laughing. You can see by the body language that these guys are not buying what Jax is putting out. So Jax is confronted about calling Brittany fat. And again, he doubles down and he says that he loves her body type and that that's one of the things he loves about her the most, and that he loves girls who look like that. Again, if you look at the guys, the body language and the eye rolls say it all. Jax is full of shit, and at this moment, he is gaslighting anybody who believes him, because everybody who is asked says they've heard Jax talk like this to Brittany. So all of the people involved know that he's full of shit and trying to bullshit, I guess, us, because he's not bullshitting the people on the cast. But nonetheless, Jax says that Brittany is working with her friends and wants to write a narrative. And he goes on to say that it's been the worst year of his life. He admits that he went crazy and was completely out of control, and that the drugs didn't help. He said he walked into rehab with a huge ego, and it took a couple of days for it to start working. But then he goes on to say that his life was saved and that he's probably here now because Brittany and everyone else made him go. See, it's true. There was a big behind the scenes push to get him into rehab, and now he's admitting it. Tom can't believe that Jax has an eBay account, so he can't seem to get past that, and he goes back to it. And Jax is like, look, you guys, I don't care. I'm going to keep doing it. I don't care what anybody thinks. I love it, and it's a hobby. Apparently, Jack's eBay gig is selling promo items he receives for free, including stuff from Jenny Craig that Brittany got. Hilarious. They move on to Jesse, and Jesse says co-parenting with Michelle has not been good. They're doing their best. The schedule has changed. But Jesse says Michelle moved in with Aaron, and a month before she was moving in, she came to him and said, I might move in with Aaron, and I talked to my lawyer, and you can't do anything about it. Whatever. There is nothing that he could do about it. And if that's the way that she came to him, well, it sounds like she's just really pissed off about, the last few years of their marriage. And if you listen to her podcast, then you know that that is true. This is how she fights. It's not cute. Then Jesse talks about a conversation he had with Aaron. He wanted to make sure that Isabella was in a safe and comfortable place when he was over their house, blah, blah, blah. And he really didn't get what he wanted out of the conversation. But at the end of the day, he ultimately says Isabella is happy and thriving, and that's good. So then Jesse talks about the call to Sheena about Lacey and the Baywatch boy. And Jax chimes in and says he thinks that Sheena inserts herself to stay relevant. Now, that's probably true, but who cares? If you're on a show and they're asking you questions, then you're going to insert yourself because that is what you have to say. Now, is she going on the show to stay relevant? I don't know. That's not for me to judge. But however people make their living is, up to them. And so I'm not going to bash Sheena for taking this part on this show. Like, good for her. Tom thinks that Jax is being a little bit too harsh on Sheena. And I honestly like Tom 2.0. I think he has cojones. His balls did drop. He chimes in a lot more than he used to. He used to never, ever stand up for people. He would always just kind of sit in the background and not say anything. And now, even though he's not like hardcore coming on strong, he is speaking his opinion. And that's kind of heartwarming. Good job, Schwartzy. So we have Brittany and Lala. And Brittany's explaining about the thong situation. Lala's egging her on, and Lala points out that there were rules when they moved out and that Jax wasn't following them. Brittany goes on to say that she'll never go near Jax again and that he is disgusting. And she says that Lala was there to witness Jax being mean and calling her fat. And Lala agrees. She says, Lala says, the narcissist does wonders when he is on display. You guys, the 5-cent sentences, I'm not sure how I feel about Lala. She's so righteous these days. Like, I love her. She's one of my favorite Bravo Lebs. But I'm just not sure how I'm feeling about, this new Lala. She's kind of righteous and always tries to come out with these like one-liners, and I don't know. Brittany says that Jax wanted the marriage to appear perfect from the outside, but he was horrible to her. He would be mean to her in private and then talk nicely about her in public. And she said that the verbal abuse and, how bad things got is why she had gotten hives and then she got numb. Remember when she went to the hospital last year and Jax went on the podcast and said that she wasn't there because she had had a stroke? And then Brittany got really pissed off and came on the podcast and said that she didn't have a stroke and Jax is full of it and on and on. Well, Brittany says all of those ailments have gone away. All of them. And she says that she thinks that the abuse was because he wasn't attracted to her anymore. Well, she feels bad and she says, I'm kind of tired of getting bashed for speaking my truth. And so Lala gives Britt permission to speak on her own experiences. And Brittany says she's not bashing the father of her child. If it's true, she doesn't want to be blamed for the way Jax treated her. So then we have Lala coming in with another one-liner. I'm totally about talking smack about a baby daddy. And that's not true because Lala said on her own podcast that she and Randall have reached a peaceful place where they can co-parent together. So again, sometimes I think Lala just says things for the camera because that is contradicting what you said on your podcast. I love you, Lala, but I just don't know. Brittany says she does for Jax what she does because she wants him to be in a better place and be a better father for Cruz. That's what we all want. And the scene ends with both Lala and Brittany agreeing that Sheena is the best secret keeper and she can gather the intel whenever she wants. Well, we have Michelle, Janet, and Sheena. Well, Janet wants to know who wears white underwear because of skid marks and spray tans and all of that stuff. You should only wear dark underwear. People wear white underwear, guys. And Janet, that might have been TMI. You might want to they have these little cotton nail wipes that you can keep on the toilet and prevent the whole skid mark situation. I'm kind of annoyed with this whole conversation, and I don't know why they are thinking that bashing unknown girl's white thong because it was a basic white thong and then going on to talk about it in this fashion was going to in some way make them come out ahead in the conversation. It was kind of gross. Sheena doesn't understand why the underwear wasn't thrown away or put in the trash or wrapped. And Janet agrees with me and says, I still don't see rock bottom in Jax. Michelle, is asked about co-parenting and she says it's not been fun. So she and Jesse are on the same page about one thing. But she also says that she doesn't want to take Isabella away from her dad. And that's why she lives so close so that he can spend a lot of time with her. And she says she loves living with Aaron and that it feels like a home. They have family dinners and he treats Isabella like he is her stepdad. Yikes. Jesse's a great father, she says, but he was a horrible husband and he is a horrible ex-husband. And depending upon his mood, depends on how he behaves. Again, she uses this little opportunity to throw in a dagger and she says, if he has a hangover, it's not good. So Nia and Kristen both think Jax is great at creating a narrative. I agree. Janet says that what trips Jax up is that his lies are so elaborate and detailed. And I just said that earlier. It's true. Like, keeping track of a lie is difficult. That's why I hate lying. And that's why it's easier to tell the truth. Zach and Jasmine also think the thong incident was a big fuck you to Brittany. And Zach points out, that it's bullshit, that Jax didn't want to go and get help for all the dumbest reasons, because he didn't want to miss out on things, because he had a $4,000 appearance fee that he was going to lose. You guys, who knew that you could get Jax for $4,000? So Zach and Jasmine talk about the temporary breakup and that Zach had with Benji. And basically, we all know that Zach was heartbroken. And in the beginning, Jasmine said that she was super sus of Benji and didn't understand what the hell what his deal was, but that now she just adores him. She says she's obsessed and she loves him. And then Zach says things are going well and that he was currently awaiting a divorce hearing in Canada and that they would know a lot more about how they were going to plan their future. The plan was for him to come in on an education visa, but for now he is on a vacation visa. So TBD, guys, let's see what happens with the Zach and Benji storyline. Let's move on to Jason and Brock. So Jason says that he had spoken to Julian, of all people, about how worried he was about Jax, and that they had a conversation about how afraid they were to wake up to a headline that Jax was gone, because that's how bad things were. And he talks about the night that the text was found between Julian and Brittany called him because Jax was like beyond out of control. And he came over and got Jax and took him to a hotel to diffuse the situation. And Jason thinks, Jax was at rock bottom and had been for a long time. He just hadn't seen it yet. Well, Danny and Luke. Danny says Jax was always too concerned about missing anything or missing out on money. So that's their take on it. And then Luke does mention that he thinks Zach looked super in love, more in love than he had ever looked with anybody he had ever seen him with. So maybe Benji is going to stick. We'll see. Moving right along to episode 3, Well, this episode is the juicy one. If you guys haven't watched it, you might want to hit pause, go watch the episode, and then come back because there's a lot to talk about. There will be a lot of spoilers, obviously. And I would love for you guys to watch it firsthand and then come back and comment what you guys think if you haven't already watched. If you have already watched, then you know that this one was really, really dark, really, really deep, and really, really hard to watch. It starts with Jax getting taken to rehab by Jason, and everyone is starting to find out about it, and they're having these conversations. And so he comes back to report to Britt that he did drop Jax off. So Janet and Michelle head over to keep Brittany company, and then Jason leaves. A little side note. Did you guys notice that Jason is dressed kind of nicely? He's wearing a polo shirt and kind of what appear to be some slacks, but then he tops them off with slides and no socks. I'm just saying. I don't know, Jason. I don't know. Janet and Brittany start to talk, and then she becomes aware that Cruz is in earshot. Thank God. I'm so glad that they left this in, because I would only imagine that Brittany was starting or going to start to get a bunch of heat about, what things she was saying in front of Cruz. And so if her just having this little scene where she says she hates talking about things like this in front of Cruzy, then you know what? If that saves her all of the hate that she's going to get, then thank goodness that they left this in. But, the girls ordered food in and they start to talk, and Michelle, being Michelle, says, if it were me, I would file for divorce tomorrow and never look back. Kristen and Luke head over to Jesse's house for a tea party. That sentence sounds just as strange as it looked. I was shocked, but having heard firsthand from Jesse that Kristen and Luke were the people he was closest to, I was curious to watch this scene. And, during the scene, they kind of talk about the breakup and how he being Jesse, thought that Michelle cheated and that it was with Aaron. But Kristen clarifies that the guy she was talking about last season was not Aaron. And Jesse says, I don't understand why all of a sudden she started to put makeup on and get all dolled up to go hiking and would not be wearing her wedding ring. And when I asked her about it, she said that she was afraid that, to be out with the diamond, but yet she wasn't wearing her wedding band. So that's weird. It's all about the honey. It's all about the honey. So Jesse calls Michelle and says, I'm all out of honey. I'm at Whole Foods and I can't find it. She says, that's because I get it at a place near Runyon, which also happens to be where she goes hiking and where Aaron lives. So Jesse maintains that if that is true and it wasn't Aaron, then Michelle actually cheated twice. I don't know, you guys. I really don't know what to believe. You got angry people going through a divorce, so it's hard for us to speculate on what really happened. And so I'm not going to do that. But Jesse announces that there's going to be a Santa Barbara getaway and that he's including everybody, Michelle and Aaron. Kristen gets a call from Janet inviting her to her birthday party at Dave & Buster's right in the middle of the tea party. And it's such an awkward exchange. You can see by Kristen's face that she did not expect this phone call and she doesn't quite know how to handle it. Then we go over to Michelle and Aaron, and Michelle is telling Aaron about the Santa Barbara trip, and Aaron flat out says that he's not going. Well, good look, Aaron. That's the smart choice. And I only wish that Michelle would have made the same decision because she should not have gone. I guess she needed to collect her episodic fee, so I'll leave that as the reason why she went. Otherwise, none of this makes any sense, but I guess they weren't going to break the fourth wall to explain that to us. Well, we see the fertility wildflower acupuncture center, and I was fascinated by the idea that they could do acupuncture for pregnancy. Like fertility acupuncture is a thing. I didn't know that. I mean, of course, I haven't had children in years and years and years, so how would I know that? But if you're trying to have a child and you can't, and you don't have the tens and tens of thousands of dollars it's going to cost for IVF, this is an option. Both girls are pregnant, Nia and Kristen, in real time. And so it worked for them. Nia said that she had struggled with unexplained infertility, but she got pregnant within 2 months of having this treatment. So they placed needles in Kristen's feet and by her ears and on her belly. And while they're laying there, Kristen mentions and reminds us that she had had a pregnancy loss last year and that she is nervous. She talks about on the confessionals that she's nervous that motherhood just may not be in the cards for her. Little do you know, Kristen, that as I tape this podcast, you are expecting your child. And the reason that they just filmed the very first reunion of the Valley early is because both you and Nia will be delivering in mid-June, and we can't wait for the season to be over in order to tape the reunion because you two will be nurturing and bonding with your beautiful babies. I'm really happy for Kristen. You can see that she is totally changed and kind of grown into becoming quite an amazing lady. I've always liked her. I've always liked her moxie and her gumption and her ability to speak her opinion. But I love who she's grown into, and I love her relationship with Luke. I think he just totally grounds her, and I think it's beautiful. Kris Kringle or Van Gogh? Who do you guys think Luke looks like? My vote is for Vincent Van Gogh. I think the pic stitch that they posted online cracked me up, and I really thought it was almost a dead ringer. So very cool. I get Kris Kringle too, like young Kris Kringle, but it's giving Van Gogh all day long. Look it up online if you don't know what I'm talking about. It's pretty funny. Luke goes over to Danny's house. Danny and Luke are visiting. So Luke goes over to visit while Danny is babysitting, and the girls are over at the fertility acupuncture center. And so Luke tells Danny that he's planning on proposing and that nobody knows. And then Fort Knox goes on to tell Luke about the boys' group chat and how they cut to Danny saying the number one rule is what happens in the boys' chat stays in the boys' chat. And then immediately they cut back to him telling Luke that Jesse said that Michelle sleeps with a billionaire for $1,500 a night, and he has evidence. Bombshell, amazing editing. They rung the bell. Ay, 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 Danny. Well, Jesse meets Jason in the Valley for coffee. Jason doesn't want to be around Zach on alcohol. That makes sense given what happened at Jax's opening last season. And then they talk about Danny drinking too much and making poor decisions. And Jason goes on to tell about a story at Halloween where he went to Jasmine, touched her on the thigh and said, "Go get daddy a drink." And then when Jasmine went away to get drinks for daddy and other people, as Jason says it, then he proceeded to grab Melissa's ass. What? Obviously, he was in a blackout. Do you know anybody that this has ever happened to? Like you're out, you're having a great time, and then, the drinks are flowing, the music's playing, and then all of a sudden there's one drink too many, and this person who is otherwise a lovely individual becomes an absolute monster and a nightmare of a human being. They start doing inappropriate things, and it's embarrassing beyond belief. I have been in that situation before. It's not pretty. Ay, ay, ay. Danny, I had no idea that this was part of your storyline. Let's move on with the party at Dave and Buster's, the jumpsuits of it all. What did you guys think of Janet and Nia's jumpsuits? They're giving very 70s, and I like them for that occasion. I'm not sure I'd wear them for anything else. They looked a little potato sacky for me, but I love their commitment to the cause. So Michelle shows up with Aaron, and Janet talks about how different they are. They're very, very different people, but Janet knows that Michelle will have a good time there because it's such a fun place. And then Jesse shows up and he's saying hi to the group, and Michelle, he high fives Michelle, which was kind of an awkward moment. And then Danny says, "Hey, aren't you going to hug me?" And Jesse's wearing a white shirt. And then Michelle weirdly chimes in and says, "Oh, well, when I was married to him, he didn't let me wear makeup because he didn't want me to get it on his white shirt." Like, what the fuck, Michelle? You're already starting shit. I'm trying to like you. You're not helping me. But I'm going off on a tangent, so I'm going to calm myself down and move on. Janet's in her own little world playing games, jumping up and down, having a good time, and double fisting medieval-sized beers, while Brittany calls Nia and Michelle over to tell them what Luke said. Michelle loses it. Nia calls Danny over, and if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, it's that the $1,500 a night escort for the billionaire. Luke ends up telling the girls because he doesn't want there to be a game of telephone. And so the girls want to bring it to a head, of course, at Janet's party, because that's what we do on these shows. Well, Michelle loses it. Then Nia calls Danny over, like I said, and oh my God, you guys, Danny's an actor. He's a child actor. If you don't know, he was on Saved by the Bell. He's still a working actor. He does a lot of voiceovers and all of the things. And so when he is confronted and he looks dead at the camera, the look on his face, and he realizes that, oh my God, I'm fucking caught, that is priceless. You know that moment is organic because he's an actor. He could have reacted differently, but he was caught so off guard that he even looked directly into the camera. And you see that Nia is kind of like, well, you started it, so now you got to say it, and now you got to tell everybody what's going on. And I can't believe Luke threw him under the bus. I mean, so they go to the confessional, and he's like, "I'm dead." The girls want to confirm so they can confront Jesse. And then, Kristen and Luke walk in, and Janet is happy that she's there. You can tell that Kristen and Luke are a little reluctant and worried, but whatever. Back at miserable Michelle's meltdown headquarters, Michelle says that it's Jesse that is broke, and that she's not the one that she would never do that. And how could he talk that way about the mother of his child, and so on and so forth. And Luke walks up and figures it out. They told Michelle about the text. And she says Jesse never touched, kissed, or gave her a compliment for years. And then Danny tells Jesse, "Hey, the cat's out of the bag, and it was me who did it." Jesse then admits it was a joke and panics. And then he says, "Well, the reason that I did it was because there's a mole in the group in the group text, and I was trying to flesh out the mole." Bullshit, Jesse. I don't believe you. And I don't believe that Danny is the mole. I think that the girls are onto the truth when they say it's bullshit. And everybody knows their husband's passwords and therefore what is on this alleged group chat. So whatever. Jesse tells Janet what's going on, but honestly, Janet doesn't want to get into it. And you can tell she just kind of blows it off. She doesn't want to cloud her party, and she moves on. Michelle goes to tell Aaron what is being said, and he tells her he thinks that she is the strongest person that he knows. Then Michelle starts to rally. This is the weirdest fucking thing, you guys. Who does this? Michelle starts to walk around asking everybody if they think Jesse should stay in a hotel for the Santa Barbara trip, or if she should, because she doesn't want to be under the same roof with Jesse. And so even though it's Jesse's trip that he announced that he is planning and organizing, somehow she thinks it's appropriate to walk around asking for everybody's vote. Brittany votes Michelle, and Janet, who doesn't want to be bothered, votes Michelle as well. And then they start to walk around, and Nia and ask other people. Sorry, she starts to walk around and ask other people. And Nia and Jasmine and Kristen go, "Well, if you're going to force us to, then we vote Jesse." Like, it's so high school. And in the confessionals, Jesse says exactly what I'm thinking as I'm watching that. Why can't she just walk up to him and handle the situation? And no way is Jesse by far worse than Jax. I don't care in what world we travel. There's no way in the world that is true. So this episode ends with Michelle crying in the corner. It's so fake. If you guys watch, she kind of sneaks off and then she kind of looks over her shoulder and notices nobody's following her. So then she starts to cry a little bit louder. And then Brittany heads over to console her. Lame. I mean, I'm really not liking Michelle. I hate saying that because I want to be a girl's girl so bad, but this girl is hard. It's hard to be a girl's girl with this girl. I bet if I met her, I would think completely differently, but gosh, she does not come across pleasantly on screen. Let's quickly talk about the after show for episode 3. Kristen and Nia asked about the Halloween incident with Danny, and Brock says he was there and Jason was not. It was at Jax's and he apologized to everyone. And Danny said he was shocked that it was brought up again. Well, Britt said she had to tell Nia. And they talk about the incident, and apparently Nia heard it was Michelle. So Danny called Jesse and apologized to him. And Janet takes exception to this. Do you? If somebody did something offensive to your partner, would you want them to call you or your partner and apologize out of respect, or both? Well, it turns out that Nia thought it was Michelle when it was actually Melissa, and that's why Danny called the wrong person, whether it be Jesse or Michelle. Either way, he called the wrong person. And then Jason tells Brock that, Danny has done some really wild things when he's drinking excessively. Well, Britt tells Lala about the hooker comment, and Schwartzy thinks it's crazy and that it got lowballed ridiculously. Schwartzy, how do you know? Nobody believes the story that was on the text anyway, but Michelle says that she felt diminished because she is successful in her own right. And Jesse's side is that she did a Q&A where she said that he wasn't her problem anymore. He says that anyone, regardless of their growth, can have a moment of weakness when triggered. I believe that to be true. I do. Brittany tells Lala that she thinks all of the comments are the men projecting. And now Janet says that she thinks the group has a way of making things up to rile the group. Michelle was sad because Danny didn't say anything to her at church after the escort incident, but Danny said he did say that he was so sorry. So again, there are so many inconsistencies in this group. One person says this, the other person says that. I just don't understand. Jesse is representing himself in the divorce, and he's kind of being a dick, but he thinks he has cause, and I wonder if it's because he was allegedly cheated on. If you ask him 2 times, Michelle says Jesse wants everything in the divorce, and interestingly enough, Jack says he doesn't want anything. He doesn't want to disrupt his kid's life or Brittany's life, and that he doesn't want to split the stuff. He's just going to start all over. That's surprising coming from Jax. But there are people who, when they close one chapter, they don't want any of things from the previous chapters coming into their new life. And it seems like Jax is one of those people. So when Jax is asked if he was being honest about his drug abuse in rehab, he said he was, but he was going through the motions. And Tom says he had a real problem and did blow like most people have casual drinks. Goodness gracious. See, I told you guys Tom was speaking up more. Jax admits it got so that in any group setting, he had to have cocaine. Jax said he had to get sober to admit that he had a problem. That's the Jax that I met the night at Jax's. He seemed very focused on his journey. And of course, I'm sure he's projecting something that he wants everybody to see. We don't see how he is behind closed doors. But again, that's what I saw, and I'm sticking to it. Well, Brittany says she used to have to say partying because it's illegal and she couldn't scream it from the rooftops. that Jack was on cocaine. So Danny is defiantly trying to ride the middle. He says maybe Jax is being manipulative and trying to get ahead of something. But Kristen agrees with me about how vulnerable Jax was in the moment. Michelle says Jesse is in financial trouble. And again, Jesse says that's the narrative that she wants everybody to believe. And I wonder, is that why he's representing himself? Is he having money trouble? Did he spend all of their money? Michelle says they did very well, but after Isabella was born, he stopped working and she stopped working and he was working less and less, and they went through millions of dollars. They were both equal business partners, and Jesse maintains Michelle had access to all of the accounts, so therefore she is culpable for where their finances stand as well. I don't know, I wasn't in their marriage. But everyone seems to know that Jesse overspends. There's talk about a $5,000 bottle of wine at some point. And Janet thinks it's stupid. I think it's stupid too. I'd never pay $5,000 for a bottle of wine. Lala points out that he's renting. There she goes again, shady Lala. And Michelle says he wants to impress people, and that he knows he's not as wealthy as he wants to project that he is. I personally know he likes expensive wine. We had a little chat about it when I met him, and that's just who he is. Whatever. I have no opinion one way or the other. Jesse says Michelle is trying to make people actively hate him. And Brittany says he racked up all the debt and is trying to hook her up and hold her liable too. Danny admits that Nia has access to his phone, and Nia admits that she looked at the boys' chat, especially during that time, and that's how they know that Jax had a girl over at the house. And Nia says everybody knows what goes on in the group chat. Luke admits he was wrong, and Danny says he got tossed from the boys' chat right after that. The group chat is still active, but apparently everybody's growing up and now it's kind of turned into a boys bitch session. And all parties agree that the group chat is toxic and that Danny is not the mole, that there were several moles in the group chat. Well, then Michelle says she knew Aaron when she was married. She does admit to knowing him, but she swears that their relationship happened after. Apparently, Kristen got a text from Michelle in 2022 saying that she was leaving Jesse and had gotten an apartment, and then they decided to work things out, so that ended up not happening after all. Nia backs up Michelle's story and said that she never met Aaron until after Jesse and Michelle had split up. And if you ask me, Michelle shouldn't be filming at all, because she says she should not have to be forced into being around Jesse at parties and vacations. That's what the show is, Michelle. It's filming you guys as you vacation and go to parties and go to dinners and live your life. Didn't you get that? I'm so fed up with this girl. I really hope that I change my opinion of her. But from what Jesse told me, I'm supposed to think of him even more favorably after episode 5. So we'll see. That's it for this episode, but we have a lot of content to get you caught up on. We'll come back with episode 4 of The Valley along with the after show. We'll bring you up to speed on Atlanta. And of course, we'll give you all your Bravo news and pop culture. So thanks for spending this time with me. Until next time, have a great day. Bye, everybody.